Good morning. Welcome to another session on environmental impact assessment.
We shall continue with Unit 5, Case Studies, Course Outcome, describe the EIA for various infrastructure projects. Learning Outcome, explain the EIA for highways and bridges. Specific Outcomes, explain the impacts of highway construction and operation on the environment. Scope, the term road building covers public roads and footways of all kinds inside and outside built up areas that are used for the movement of persons and goods. The roads involved will generally be two-lane rural roads or single or two-lane rural footways that are intended to establish a traffic link between two specified points or to open up a region in a practical way by providing a new or expanded transportation network. For this reason, we will not be considering here the special problems of urban roads or developments of the motorway type, such as stresses on the population in centers of population. As dictated by purpose, volume of traffic, and the given natural morphological conditions in the landscapes to be crossed, the design standards, that is, the right of way width, vertical and horizontal alignment, structures, carriageway pavements, that the planners elect to adopt in the light of vehicle characteristics will be more or less generous. Despite the wide variations in topography, climate, hydrography, soil types, and vegetation that exist, there are relatively standard rules for planning and construction that govern the three main stages of building a road. Right? So, what are those three main guidelines? One is deposit a fill of the minimum height required using suitable soil that, if possible, is available from nearby sources. That is, you need to fill up, right, to the minimum height that is required. Meaning, if at all you are digging out something, you need to fill it up to the minimum height that is required using some soil, right? Maybe possible if it is available from neighboring sources. Meaning you cannot just excavate and just leave it like that. You need to fill up to the minimum height, right? Protect this fill with a system of passages through it, and this just to drain away rainwater and any constantly occurring surface water. So it is not only filling, right? You need to protect the road surface by providing some ditches or by providing some drains, right? So that the water that is uh, that is passing through the road surface is properly drained off. Generally, what they will do is they will provide some slope is provided on the roadway such that the water drains away. If you stand in the center of the road and see over a long distance, you will see that it will be sloping from the center line towards the outer ends or outer edges on both sides. Why? Because so that whenever rainfall falls, it will drain away to the sides. But at the sides, you need to provide some drainage system so that the water doesn't stagnate at the sides, and it doesn't erode away the sides of the road, right? And the last one is pave the carriageway with bound with cement, bituminous material, etc., or unbound mineral layers in a manner suited for the wheel loads anticipated and their frequency of passage. So you need to provide proper subgrades and grades, right, on the road surface so that it can withstand the impact loading and also the wheel loads that are anticipated, and also the frequency of passage, right? It is not just one lorry or one bus or one car that is going to go. There will be a frequent movement of vehicles, so you need to take into account of that continuous loading. So all roads require constant maintenance, though the amount will vary with heaviness of use. So proper maintenance should be there. So nowadays, not nowadays, like in the Indian system, that uh, not much maintenance is provided for the roads. So they just build some roads and they leave it like that. And due to rainfall, you will see that a lot of potholes will form within a few months' time, or maybe 6 months' time. You will see some potholes or some some erosion on the road surface, and they just do some patchwork and fill it up. They don't do proper maintenance, due to which the roads uh, quickly erode over time, and maybe after a year or so you will see that the road is totally gone away, and a new road has to be laid out. So that should not be the case. first of all, they should have provided the road in such a way that it will last for a few years time. But it is not just laying the roads, and you cannot expect it to uh, sustain for many years. You need to provide proper maintenance, so which is lacking in our country. So, what are some things that we need to do? Ground to be kept free from vegetation, drainage system to be fully operational, erosion damage to be made good when cut and fill methods are employed, carriageway to be repaired, right? So, these are some things that they need to do. So, we'll come to the environmental impacts. The criteria that should be applied are those developed over the last few years for environmental protection in the road building field, as modified to suit different environmental conditions and the different weights given to the factors evaluated. The present environmental brief will deal not with the effects stemming directly from the movement of traffic of roads and from the operation of vehicles, but simply with the impacts in both a wider and narrower sense, that due to the interference there has to be with the natural environment arising from the reasons for building the roads and from subsequent maintenance these roads will need. So what they want to say is that they are not like, we'll not be looking at effects that are coming from the movement of traffic on the road, right? So that obviously will happen, right? Because you'll have a lot of roads, lot of vehicles going on the road, so naturally there will be some wear and tear. But if you have constructed the road in a proper way and proper maintenance is provided, surely it will not wear away or tear away in a short duration, right? So these impacts can be divided into 4 categories: widespread direct impacts, second linear indirect impacts, third one is spot impacts or spot effects, and the last one is consequential impacts. Consequential impacts is as a consequence of some things what happens, right? As a consequence of doing something, what are the impacts? So widespread direct impacts, so regional adverse developmental effects. So the opening up of a new road of a region previously inaccessible to motor traffic, or simply the upgrading of the existing artery, causes changes to living conditions in the areas affected. These changes being of greater or lesser severity in line with the smaller or larger potential that there is for development. So the range of more intensive or new human activities that may arise as a result is vast, and it's therefore quite impossible for their effects to be overlooked, right? Such as there will be migratory movements, uncontrolled growth of settlements, changes in land use, etc. As well as this, there will be changes in the socio-cultural and socio-economic conditions, and these two in their capacity as possibly secondary impacts will require careful consideration. So thought will be also need to be given to the ways in which adverse developmental effects can be avoided or mitigated by collateral measures, land use plans, mitigation regulations, and monitoring of compliance. So basically what they want to say is that due to the construction of road, there will be new settlements or new people coming in, there will be a lot of movement or migration, there will be some business development, socio-economic conditions will improve or socio-cultural conditions will change. So what they're saying is that we need to have some rules and regulations for how much migration can take place, and some rules for the land use plans, and monitoring whether they are keeping up with the standards that are necessary in terms of the buildings and all those things. So if you do all those things, then we can you know uh, we can have some control on the migration. Otherwise there will be rapid development, and there will be a great impact on the environment. Adverse effect on areas deserving of protection. So the technical and economic aim will be to produce the shortest possible link between 2 points, but the full achievement of this aim will be frustrated firstly by the need to allow for items whose position cannot be altered, right? And secondly by the need to divert around areas deserving of protection. So such areas include ones containing vegetation worth preserving, ones subject or due to be made subject to landscape protection or natural preservation, uh, mm, right? Natural preservation orders, ones of high agricultural value, ones containing high density or historically important buildings, and also in particular specific small biotopes, game reserves, and fauna stocks. So here what they are saying is that there are some areas which require protection, like especially some vegetation which is good, we cannot cut it off and build some road on that. And you might have come across some issues like that in Tamil Nadu, right? So they wanted to remove off all the agricultural areas and build the 8 lane roads, right? So there will be a great impact on the agricultural value, there will be a great impact on the landscape protection, and the it also affects the plants and animals who are going to who are taking shelter, or that is habitat for them, so you cannot cut out those things, right? So these things need to be taken careful attention when we are building roads. So you cannot just like that remove off the uh, natural vegetation and create a lot of impact on the flora and fauna. Indirect linear impacts and spot impacts, right? Going to the second category. So effects on the appearance of the landscape. Applying the traditional rule of road building may help to moderate the look of the artificial changes made to nature. Where these rules are to be followed, where these rules are not followed as closely as they should be, such things such as deep cuts and over high fills will break up the natural lines and disturb the appearance of the landscape. Landscape is the the topography that is there. Okay, so the appearance of the topography there that is present where you are laying the roads. So if you do something in such a way that you cut out or dig up some parts and leave it like that, or you overfill some of the parts and like small mountains are being formed over there, it will greatly affect the topography of that particular place. And a simple example of this is you can see in not only in Polachi, maybe in so many other towns, and they uh, do some drainage work and they dig up the streets or sometimes even the roads, and they just don't fill it up. So you will see that small over hills are there, right? Or sometimes deep cuts are there, and they just don't fill it up and bring them to the natural old condition. So you have a lot of bumps on the streets or roadways, which is really creating a lot of impact for the people, right? It is not just the appearance, people have to go through those roads, so it's a hard time for them. Second one is fragmenting impacts of road cuttings across existing ecosystem and changes to the microclimate. A road cuts the land, it crosses into two, and it does so the more positively the greater is the difference in elevation between the carriageway and the natural terrain. It creates a barrier to human beings and animals and stops geographical interchanges, example migratory movements, by obstructing the movement of water and air, by causing a shadowing action, by preventing heat and cold from dissipating, by withdrawing or building up moisture, and by producing drifts of wind blown material. Uh, Wind blown material. It causes changes in the microclimate that may damage or destroy the existing systems. So here they are basically talking about the climatic conditions due to the construction of these roads. Why? Because it affects the ecological system. I just spoke about that in the last slide. It affects the ecological system because it affects the flora and fauna, and also it obstructs the movement of water and air, right? So it actually affects the moisture content, and lot of um, during construction of roadways there is a lot of dust that is being blown away. So all these things will affect the microclimate. So landscape uptake and demand for land. A road takes up a strip of land or greater or lesser width which is demarcated physically by the road fill or cut, including the ditches and other ancillary works, and which is legally defined by the ground acquired. It is also standard practice in many countries for the soil needed for the fill to be dug by an excavator or bulldozer from shallow trenches immediately adjacent to the road in a process known as site borrowing. The method saves on transport but also creates a demand for fairly large amounts of traditional land and leaves behind it. Unless leveling up is explicitly demanded, troughs following the line of the road that are at risk from erosion and that may also harbor pathogens if, for example, they turn into mud holes. Even when soil or rock borrowing is confined to pits or quarries, these should be left in as near natural a state as possible after work at the site has been completed. So, so how much you are, from where you are digging up, from where you are filling, all those things matter. So even it can cause something called as mud holes, and it can harbor or enhance the growth of pathogens, which will create a lot of problems. Similarly, site waste, residual quantities of unused soil and building materials and so on should be disposed of with due care for the environment. After a new road has been completed, animal drawn farm carts and herds of livestock are sometimes regulated from the carriageway to an unpaved strip by the side of the road. Depending on the type of soil and the amount of use they receive, such cattle tracks may be further deepened by wind and soil erosion or may become impassable at certain times of the year. Also, constant use will make them wider and wider. To prevent this happening, they should receive the proper maintenance in the same way as the road. So, newly built roads should be positioned in an adequate distance away from the traditional tracks used for livestock herds. Removal of vegetation and topsoil. In some areas, the corridor uh, cleared for the building of the road will be made sufficiently wide at the outset to stop trees and bushes from growing back to the edges of the road too quickly. It also needs to be ensured that when the margins of forest or woodland are cut back, trees brought down by the wind cannot fall on the road. Ground is occasionally cleared off by burning off, and this combined with the physical stress on the sensitive thin layer of humus can give rise to soil erosion during the building period. Right? Proper treatment of vegetation, preservation of existing forest margins or isolated trees, reforestation, laying of humus cover, and planting of newly created areas of exposed soil together with reasonable long-term care for such areas must have compatible technical details specified for them in the plans and must be monitored by the authorities supervising the building. As also much the setting up of storage for the stripped topsoil and upkeep of the latter and the subsequent relaying of the soil. So you need to properly take measures for the treatment of the vegetation, right? Production of soil erosion and changes of soil structure, improper land clearance, failure to observe the soil mechanics characteristics of the soil present, misassessment of the stability of cut or deposited slopes, or total neglect of this basic question may lead to progressive damage of the road pavement itself and to its immediate or more distant surroundings. In the worst case, and particularly where the road is exposed to adverse meteorological conditions, such damage may also be severe that the road is totally destroyed and rendered impassable. As well as this, there is also the possibility that earth may slip, settle, or be washed away over large areas, and this can produce extensive soil erosion, which particularly in hilly or mountainous countries may extend well beyond the area of the road proper and take in neighboring slopes or valley floors. Each rock slope that appear solid can become unstable if roads are cut in them without paying proper attention to the geological structure or by excessive heavy blasting. Although soil erosion is usually caused by action of water as a transporting medium, in arid and semi-arid zones, it is necessary to pay heed to the wind erosion, which is triggered off or at least encouraged by removing even sparse vegetation or by placing roads at an aerodynamically unfavorable elevation uh, where use is made of fine grain type of soil to form unbound base courses. Simply the movement of traffic may enable erosion by wind that creates dust and water that washes the soil away to destroy the carriageway, as well as expert soil surveys, proper planning and official supervision of the earthwork and rockworks to reduce vulnerability to damage to minimum. The road and its surroundings must receive constant maintenance to remedy minor damages in the initial stages and prevent it from spreading. It is particularly important for areas of exposed soil to be planted as quickly and as permanently as possible with native plants in order to obtain biotechnical stabilization of soil by deep rooted plants, hedges, fences, etc. A further important contribution will be made by the careful non-destructive drainage of surface and infiltrating water. Particular care should be taken to stop erosion when building roads of tertiary stages such as rural roads, feeder roads, and developer roads. In this case, road building comes down essentially to questions of hydraulic engineering and earthworks. The road alignment should be along the crest of elevations and it should largely follow the terrain. Where water courses have to be crossed, this should be preferably be done by means of wholly or partly flooded fords, which in no way obstruct water runoff and thus help in preventing erosion. Effects on the water balance. So it is inevitable that there will be interference, some of it considerable, with the existing water balance in the course of road building operations. If water courses have to be diverted to prevent them crossing the line, of a road, then if the laws of hydrology are not observed, this may result in adverse changes to the discharge regime of the water courses caused by the changes in roughness gradient or cross section of the bed. So there are many different ways in which water balance can be affected, and among them are deliberate or accidental impoundment by road filling, draining of wetlands and swamps, lowering of the groundwater level, deepening of the water courses by extraction of the excessive amounts of material from their beds, bridge works built on water courses with the risk that they create of blockage by flotsam, and creation of reservoirs for livestock watering by exploiting the effect of the road fill and its attendant problems of infection and pest breeding. Right, so you need to ensure that the proper drainage is provided, and mm, you know uh, sometimes whenever you're building roads on or not roads or bridges or the water courses, careful attention has to be paid, right? And basically it can cause a lot of problems, right? So, one disadvantage that will be apparent is the reliable data on the volume, frequency, and duration of the precipitation is seldom available, and hence reliance has to be placed on empirical data combined with observations of nature and experience gained in comparable situations. Here, too, great importance attaches to constant maintenance being put in hand at the early stage. The risk of surface water and groundwater being polluted is particularly serious in countries where it's difficult for drinking water to be checked due to special care of the supply. In countries of this kind, where the winters are cold, pollution from road salting should be prevented by selecting non-polluting materials for salting use. Right, we'll continue from here in the next session.
Thus, we come to the end of this session. Thank you for your participation. Looking forward to meeting you in the next session.